The heavy oak door of the hallway bathroom didn't just lead to a room of porcelain and tile anymore. It was the border of a rogue state. Commander Sarah stood in the hallway, her boots crunching on a discarded frozen solid mitten. Inside, the rhythmic thumping of a plastic stool against the tub sounded like a war drum. For 7 days, the sky had fallen in white sheets, and for 7 days, the small people had reverted to a hunter-gatherer society. They were no longer her children. They were creatures composed of 40% jam, 40% gray slush, and 20% pure, unadulterated defiance. "Gentlemen," Sarah said, her voice echoing with the false calm of a bomb technician, "the National Weather Service has issued a clear sky advisory. The yellow buses ride at dawn. The treaty of the Ivory Soap is no longer up for debate." A wet, heavy silence fell behind the door. Then a high-pitched voice, her 5-year-old Leo, shouted through the wood. "We have renounced the friction of the washcloth mother. We belong to the grime now." "The grime provides," her eldest Toby added with the fervor of a cult leader. Sarah sighed and tightened the belt of her terrycloth robe. She reached into her pocket and felt the cold, hard plastic of the secret weapon, a bottle of 3-in-1 shampoo that promised a strawberry explosion, but smelled more like industrial-grade desperation. She kicked the door open. The humidity hit her like a physical wall. The children had somehow managed to turn the shower on high heat 40 minutes ago, creating a fog so thick it had its own zip code. Through the mist, she saw them. They had used charcoal from the fireplace to draw tactical stripes across their cheeks. Toby was standing on the rim of the toilet, wielding a dripping toilet brush like a trident. Leo sat in the empty basin of the tub, surrounded by a moat of Legos that looked suspiciously like tank traps. "You're outnumbered, Admiral," Toby declared, pointing the brush at her. "The floor is lava, the water is acid, and we haven't seen our shins since Tuesday. We've forgotten what they look like. We like it this way." Sarah stepped over a pile of damp, salty jeans. "Then it's a good thing," she whispered, reaching for the faucet, "that I brought the Kraken." Sarah didn't just turn the handle, she engaged the Massacre Setting. The pipes groaned, a deep metallic thrum that vibrated through the floorboards, and then the detachable showerhead, the Kraken, roared to life. It didn't just spray water, it delivered a focused jet of lukewarm justice. "Shields up!" Toby screamed, diving behind the shower curtain. Leo, the cabin boy, scrambled to his feet, attempting the slippery seal maneuver. He had coated his torso in a week's worth of accumulated pizza grease and glitter, making him nearly impossible to apprehend. As Sarah lunged, he slid through her arms like a greased pig at a county fair, cackling with a manic, high-pitched glee that echoed off the subway tiled walls. "You'll never take us alive," Leo shouted, retreating to the fortress of solitude, the narrow, dusty gap between the toilet and the vanity. "I don't need you alive," Sarah muttered, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted the nozzle to pulse. "I just need you smelling like something that hasn't died in a hedge." She swung the Kraken in a wide arc. The water hit the shower curtain with the sound of 1,000 tiny drums. Toby fought back, launching a barrage of rubber ducks that he had modified with suction cups. One caught Sarah squarely on the forehead with a wet thwack, sticking there like a third yellow plastic eye. She didn't blink. She couldn't afford to show weakness. The air in the bathroom was now a swirling vortex of steam and lavender-scented chemical warfare. The Lego tank traps were floating now, creating a treacherous nautical minefield. Sarah waded in, her slippers sacrificed to the rising tide. "The hair, Toby," she commanded, closing in on the eldest. "The hair has developed its own gravitational pull. I found a AA battery in your cowlick this morning. It ends now." Toby brandished the toilet brush trident, but his grip was failing. The steam was softening his resolve and his crusty exterior. The charcoal war paint was beginning to run, turning his defiant snarl into a sad, gray smudge. "I won't go back to the world of polo shirts and long division," he cried, making a final desperate stand atop the closed toilet lid. "The yellow bus waits for no man," Sarah countered. She deployed a handful of exploding suds. A handful of bubble bath flicked with expert precision. The bubbles hit Toby's chest, blooming into a white cloud of cleanliness. He looked down at the foam in horror, as if he had been struck by a magic spell. The spell of hygiene was infectious. The more he scrubbed to get the bubbles off, the cleaner he became. He was defeating himself. Meanwhile, Leo had been cornered by a rogue stream of water that had ricocheted off the mirror. He was currently trying to eat the spray, which was a tactical error that led to a fit of giggles. The Admiral saw her opening. She dropped the Kraken, grabbed a fluffy, oversized towel in each hand, and prepared for the pincer movement. The pincer movement was a success. With the precision of a cargo net capturing a pair of wild tuna, Sarah hauled both boys into the tub. The water, which had started clear, instantly turned the color of a highway slush puddle in late February. "The extraction begins," Sarah announced, rolling up her sleeves and grabbing the coarse exfoliating mitt. "The scrubber of truth." She started with Leo. As the warm water hit his shins, the first layer of the week sloughed off, revealing a mysterious blue tint. "Leo, why is your left leg the color of a Smurf?" "Science," the boy whispered, watching the blue dye swirl into the drain. "I was trying to see if skin could absorb Gatorade. It can't. But it can store it for later." As Sarah moved the scrubber upward, she hit a snag near his hip. It wasn't dirt. It was a sticker. A "great job" star from the Friday before the snowstorm, now fused to his epidermis like a prehistoric barnacle. She peeled it back with a surgical wince, revealing skin so pale and clean it looked like new fallen snow. "I'm disappearing," Leo wailed, watching his tattoos vanish. "My history, it's all going down the hole." Then came Toby's hair. This was the dark heart of the mutiny. Sarah applied a palmful of strawberry explosion and began to dig. Her fingers met resistance almost immediately. "Is that Velcro?" she muttered. "That's my emergency stash," Toby admitted, his face pressed against the porcelain as she worked the lather. Out of the soapy depths of his crown, Sarah extracted a single, perfectly preserved Cheeto, which had achieved a texture similar to driftwood. A plastic army man who had been MIA since the great sledding incident of Tuesday. A wad of gum so ancient it had crystallized into a gemstone. "I could open a museum with what's in this cowlick, Toby," Sarah said, rinsing the suds away. As the grime retreated, the children began to shrink. It was a physical transformation. Without the stiffening agent of dried hot chocolate and the structural support of mud-caked jeans, they looked small, fragile, and remarkably like the children she remembered from a week ago. The exoskeleton was gone. The smell of wet dog and pine needles was replaced by synthetic fruit and innocence. The boys sat in the subsiding bubbles, looking dazed and defeated. The bathroom was a disaster zone. Towels lay like fallen soldiers. The mirror was weeping condensation, and a single rubber duck floated upside down in a sea of gray water. "Victory is mine," Sarah whispered, reaching for the dry towels. But as she lifted Leo out of the tub, she noticed his hands. He was staring at them with a strange, wide-eyed intensity. "Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes, Leo." "Where did my fingernails go? I think you scrubbed them off." Sarah looked down. His nails were so clean they were translucent, but his eyes held a new, mischievous glint. The mutiny wasn't over. It was just changing tactics. The Admiral led the prisoners of war down the hallway, their feet making wet, rhythmic slaps against the hardwood. They were wrapped so tightly in oversized towels that they looked like two disgruntled burritos. The fierce warriors of the Porcelain Sea had been neutralized, replaced by two boys who smelled faintly of artificial strawberries and surrender. "To the barracks!" Sarah commanded, nudging them into the bedroom. The room was a graveyard of discarded snow gear, but the beds, freshly made with crisp, cold sheets, waited like open invitations to a ceasefire. This was the neutral zone. "The terms are simple," Sarah said, standing at the foot of the beds while the boys hopped into their pajamas. "You will consume 1 glass of water. You will allow the application of the healing ointment, also known as lotion, to your sandpapered elbows, and in exchange, I will grant a stay of execution on the 8 p.m. lights-out rule." Toby, the former first mate, looked at his brother. His hair, now fluffy and ridiculous without its structural grime, stood up in a dozen different directions. "We want the legend of the Red Dragon," read aloud. Toby countered, narrowing his eyes. Full voices, no skipping the boring descriptions of the mountain ranges. "And the crusts cut off the toast tomorrow," Leo added, seizing the moment of diplomatic weakness. "No jagged edges, smooth borders only." Sarah sighed. It was a steep price. Negotiating with clean children was often harder than battling dirty ones. They were more aerodynamic and their brains seemed to function faster without the layer of soot. "Agreed," she said, extending a hand. "The Treaty of the Flannel Pajamas is signed." They shook on it, small, damp hands meeting her pruned, soapy ones. As she tucked them in, the house finally fell into a terrifying, unfamiliar silence. The radiators hissed, a comforting sound that lacked the chaotic energy of the week's blizzard. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching the two mounds under the blankets. They looked peaceful. They looked civilized. They looked like they might actually survive a second-grade math worksheet tomorrow. She turned to leave, but Toby's voice drifted out from the darkness. "Mom?" "Yes, Toby. The dirt says it'll be back for us." It whispered it into the drain. Sarah smiled, leaning her head against the doorframe. "I know, Toby. And the Kraken will be waiting."